Welcome to each of you joining us for this time of remembering and reflecting our chaplaincy during the COVID-19 pandemic. As a community of chaplains, educators, students, and caregivers, we have journeyed through a year like no other. At the beginning of March of 2020, we could never have imagined what we would experience and what we would be called to do to meet the needs of all the people that we serve. Through it all, we have given much of ourselves, our time, our energy, our compassion, and many times our last nerve to meet the needs of many in ways that we never even realized that we could. And so now, over the next hour, you are invited to take this time for yourself. This service of remembrance and reflection is for us as chaplains to give thanks for the work that we have been given to do, to honor all that we have given of ourselves, and to reflect on what this past year has meant to us as individuals and as a profession. We will hear from chaplains and educators as they share their reflections on their work and life throughout the pandemic. We will hear from our chaplains of our many different faith and spiritual traditions as they read from their sacred texts to remind us that the holy has connected us and seen us through. And we will be encouraged through it all to continue to take care of ourselves and to honor who we are and all that we have done. As we spend this time together, I pray that we each do so, knowing that we are not alone and that there is a community of caregivers caring for each other as we remember and reflect together.
Hi, I'm Daryl Owens, one of the former APC presidents, and I'm serving as the Women's Services Chaplain and Grief Counselor here at the University of North Carolina Hospitals in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. I'd like to share this prayer with you. It's called Bless What Eludes Our Grasp by Reverend Ted Loder. Lord, so many things skitter through our minds, and we give chase to gather them and hold them in a bunch to you. But they go this way and that, while we go that way and this. So gather us up instead and bless what eludes our grasp, but not yours. Trees and bees, fireflies and butterflies, roses and barbecues, and people. Lord, the people. Bless the people. Birthday people. Giving birth people. Being born people. Conformed people. Dying people. Dead people. Hostage people. Banged up people. Held down people. Leader people, lonely people, limping people, hungry people, surfeited people, indifferent people, first world people, second world people, third world people, one world people, your people, all people. Bless them, Lord. Bless what eludes our grasp, but not yours.
My name is Melech Lenski. I have worked as a staff chaplain for 16 years at Freighter Hospital in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I would like to share with you a few reflections on my experience of being a chaplain during the COVID-19 pandemic. At the beginning, COVID was particularly scary. Chaplains and others lacked PPE, especially face masks. and I felt uneasiness about being on the floors and visiting patients. Even when chaplains received a special distribution of face masks with permission to wear them if we wished to do so, I still felt funny doing so, given that most staff were still not wearing masks. Nonetheless, I began to wear them, and this provided some comfort. Furthermore, how to dress appropriately and not bring COVID home on my person became a separate, time-consuming challenge. Prior to COVID, I was strongly opposed to techno-chaplaincy. I believed that a chaplaincy visit needed a personal, in-person touch. At the beginning of the pandemic, in order to preserve PPE, Frederick Hospital barred chaplains and others from visiting patients in isolation. And of course, chaplains are barred from the rooms of patients with COVID-19. Consequently, the question arose of how chaplains could care for these patients. At this time, staff chaplains viewed an excellent webinar from the Chaplaincy Innovation Lab on the subject of telechaplaincy, perhaps the timeliest webinar that I have ever viewed. The speaker provided direction regarding how to make telephone visits. Because chaplains could not see many patients in person, I realized that the telephone or other technology would be the only way to connect with these patients. Suddenly, I was telephoning patients and finding some of the visits, especially with the COVID-19 patients, to be very meaningful and deep, notwithstanding the mode of communication. I eventually branched into the occasional use of video technology and had two very profound end-of-life visits with the non-responsive patient in his or her room, the family at home, and I elsewhere in the hospital. This opened up a new way to practice as a chaplain. This became even more important as I realized that COVID-19 patients were singularly isolated, no visitors, and limited staff time spent in their room because of the need for much PPE and staff's fear of contracting COVID-19. Rounding on staff on patient care units. I've always found this difficult. I felt awkward doing so and suspected that many staff members would rather not be bothered. Nevertheless, I pushed myself beyond my comfort zone to start conversation locations where nurses and others had gathered, to speak with staff in hallways, and to find other opportunities to check in and offer support. In the end, I began to build some nice relationships and gave support to staff that sometimes felt beleaguered. I began more deliberate rounding on colleagues. Because of the stresses faced by colleagues in the spiritual services department, I devoted more time to listening and to supporting my colleagues. During the second wave of COVID this past fall, I reinforced the changes made in the first round. In general and significantly, I realized the need to be more outgoing to support staff and to be, shall we say, an ambassador of good cheer throughout the hospital. I realized that there are perhaps hundreds of opportunities each day to strengthen and validate everyone who walks through the hallways. I realized that I, as a chaplain, needed to greet and validate and not just walk silently through the corridors. During this time, I accepted an assignment to round weekly on 2 inpatient care units, on one of which I did not typically see patients. Nurses were often busy and running around. Other staff, however, really appreciated the time and attention. Nursing assistants, EBS staff, food service employees, supply chain staff, and even some excellent conversations with providers. This broadened my range of operation and prompted me to minister to many new people, and hopefully fostered the strength and confidence of other staff. Again, I strove to be more outgoing and to be an ambassador of good cheer. Recently, I had an excellent video visit with a patient. It was far nicer than if we had visited by telephone. It taught me again the value of being willing to minister in different ways. One of the great lessons of the COVID pandemic is the rapidity with which change can happen. Tomorrow may very well bring the unexpected. This is a very, very valuable lesson for life, and one which has continued to affect my ministry.
Hi, my name is Olivia Bauer, and I'm an ordained interfaith minister. First, a short poem by Hafiz called Drop the Knife. Once a young woman said to me, "Hafiz, what is the sign of someone who knows God?" I became very quiet and looked deep into her eyes and replied, "My dear, they have dropped the knife. Someone who knows God has dropped the cruel knife that most so often use upon their tender self and others." Would you join me in offering an interspiritual prayer by Mirabai Starr? Beloved One, living light, Spirit of all that is, we give thanks. Thank you for welcoming us into this sacred circle. We come from everywhere, and we find you wherever we are, inside the holy houses of each of the world's faiths, and out in the wild places of the earth. Shoulder to shoulder in the mosque, bending to press our hearts to the ground in surrender. In the haunting Hebrew melodies of our ancestors, as we call on the Shekinah to infuse us with her indwelling feminine spirit. In the communion bread and wine, which we take in remembrance of the Prince of Peace. We hear your voice joining with ours when we chant the divine names in Sanskrit and Tibetan, Tiwa and Maya and Maori. We meet you high on alpine trails, where we stop to rest among fragrant wild herbs, beside a stream rushing with melted snow. We feel you holding us when we float in the arms of the ocean, and she sways us with her breath. We kiss you when we are making love. We mourn you when an elder releases her final exhalation. We soothe you when we rock a tired child in our arms. We look for you in the pulsating emptiness. Search for your true form in the heart of formlessness. Unexpectedly recognize you when we give up and turn away. You shine through the ecstatic stanzas of the poets and mystics, each one singing your praises in a different language. You well up in our aching hearts when we cry out for the pain of the world. You are the call to justice and the answering response of mercy. You are in the wounding of the earth, and you are the only hope for mending her. O Great Spirit, Father, Mother God, true self and no self, invisible, animating energy of life, we claim our place at your table and find ourselves home at last. Here, may we eat and be filled, drink and become unbridled, lay down our burdens and take refuge, drop into your sacred silence and remember. And let us take this remembrance back out into our lives, that we may truly be of service in this broken and beautiful world. Amen.
My name is Lisa Barnes, and this is a reflection on my experiences of the COVID-19 pandemic. From March through October 2020, at the start of the COVID-19 awareness, there seemed to be a general sense of panic in the hospital. I found myself attending meetings twice a week in which we discussed all the changes that administration was putting in place. I felt overwhelmed with the constant changes that would take place within a week's time. It was difficult to keep up. Sometimes changes would take place within a day. The morning would be one thing, and by the end of my day, there would be a change to that one thing. I felt exhausted with information overload, keeping up with changes and with trying to figure out what I needed to do differently in order to provide spiritual care for the patients in my program. Cognitively, I was aware that I was trying to cope with my own COVID-19 stressors. As the weeks passed, it was harder to be motivated about work. I took time off and engaged in local recreation such as going to the coast, hiking, spending time with immediate family, and while those days off were enjoyable, I didn't feel refreshed when coming back to work. I still had difficulty maintaining presence for my patients. I engaged in my usual spiritual practices, such as creating art and journal writing, which, under other circumstances, have served me well. However, they were no longer working for me. I began to watch shows on Netflix to distract myself, and then I would feel unproductive. Unimportant events would give rise to critical thoughts and mental ranting. I knew that I needed to change my self-care strategies and to be compassionate with my inner struggles. I identified my losses and gave myself permission to grieve those losses. I tried different spiritual practices or put a twist on the ones that I usually use. I had an angry art party for myself and my daughters, and we created art to give expression to our angry feelings. I limited my social media and my watching of shows. Instead, I did body stretching for 30 minutes even when I didn't feel like it. I walked daily on my lunch breaks and gave attention to my senses. To maintain presence at work, I began taking time to pray for every one of my 155 patients. When a mental rant threatened or when I unwittingly found myself in the middle of one, I used my breath prayer. On pleasant days, I went barefoot on the campus ball field during my lunchtime walks in order to ground myself. I began to use the double finger labyrinth that we have in our department, and I discovered this to be a grounding exercise as well. At present, these changes seem to be helping to soothe my inner person. From November to December 2020, I took time off the first week of November and went to the coast with a friend for a few days, and then I just hung around my house for the rest of the time. When it was time to go back to work, I didn't feel rested. It was difficult to feel motivated. Even the smallest of tasks felt heavy and overwhelming. I continued with my one-to-one patients visits and made myself go on the units to interact with other patients not on my caseload. After these visits, I felt better. It was the initial move to go and do it that proved to be so hard. The same thing happens after my weekend. Simple tasks seem huge, and it's hard to get going on any kind of a project. My body and my mind want to be on hold, not think, not do. However, my emotions have amped up, particularly in the areas of irritability and cynicism. I don't like it, and I try to give myself grace and self-compassion. Even there, I struggle because it disturbs me to find myself becoming this person who feels incompetent, incapable, and critical. Fortunately, this isn't a constant state of being. I have days when I accomplish what feels like a lot and it's satisfying. Overall, I try to just do what I can do in one day. Only this morning, December 18th, I was reflecting on all the amazing things I get to do as part of my job, and I had a moment of pure elation and joy. Another thing that happened just as I was writing this entry is that I received notification that the hospital is part of the Phase 1A rollout to receive the vaccine. It looks like this will happen by late December. I'm feeling a bit giddy to realize that the future holds an end to this pandemic. I began this year with a photo folder named 2020 Year of Amazing. Little did I know what the amazing part would be. Amid a pandemic, wildfires, and unending work changes, I had some amazing moments of self-reflection and spiritual growth. I think I will continue with another folder, 2021, another year of amazing, because I believe it will be just that.
Hi, I am Chaplain Julie Bond at St. Anne Hospital in Burien, Washington. I will be reading to you today from a Christian Bible, Matthew chapter 6, verses 25 through 34. Therefore, I tell you, do not worry about your life, what you will eat or drink, or about your body, what you will wear. Is not life more than food, and the body more than clothes? Look at the birds of the air. They do not sow or reap or store away in barns, and yet your Creator feeds them. Are you not much more valuable than they? Can any one of you, by worrying, add a single hour to your life? And why do you worry about clothes? See how the flowers of the field grow? They do not labor or spin. Yet I tell you that not even Solomon, in all his splendor, was dressed like one of these. If that is how God clothes the grass of the field, which is here today and tomorrow, is thrown into the fire, will he not much more clothe you, of little faith? So do not worry, saying, what shall we eat? Or what shall we drink? Or what shall we wear? But seek God's kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well. Therefore, do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own. Amen.
As I look at this screen, I can't help but take a brief trip back in time to January 2020 in Crystal City, Virginia. I can recall the exact thoughts and feelings. Looking forward to seeing familiar faces from colleagues that share a passion for spiritual care. Wondering if folks will remember me and continue conversations from the year before. Hoping that my slow and deliberate eating technique wouldn't distract others when the presentation started back up. But more so than ever, desperate for an opportunity to put my brand of chaplaincy on display, connect with others, and help this profession evolve. Little did I know that just a few weeks later, this virus on the news that I wasn't really concerned about at the time was going to create an immediate shift in the world and how I functioned as a chaplain. The world outside of the clinical chaplain context has turned upside down. Just take a look at any device that allows you to connect. Where there was invitation to relationship before, there was now fear that closeness would somehow result in either you or someone you love potentially being negatively affected by the virus. all of a sudden this new word, social distancing, became a thing and people start wearing face masks all over the place. I have no doubt the immediate disconnection we have felt as a collective people has contributed to the even more disturbing realities of systematic injustice, toxic social and political relationships, and sharing personal and collective pain in ineffective, disconnecting, and ultimately life depreciating ways. 2020 brought changes, but not the kind we felt entitled to. Some of the immediate changes in the clinic were daily emails updating us on what was going on with the virus, some faculty meetings to make sure we had some kind of space where we actually saw each other, protocols to make sure we were protecting ourselves and others, but the most dramatic one was the shift in visitation. All of a sudden, the halls were empty unless you were essential personnel and provided direct patient care. It left us wondering where the place for chaplains was. We weren't allowed to go in many rooms to provide care, and there wasn't really a protocol for providing support via telephone or other technology. The faculty meetings all of a sudden felt tense, and any one of us could have been spiritually assessed as having a fear of the unknown. But what happened next is mind-boggling to me. I started seeing a brand of post-apocalyptic pastoral practices that makes me feel like we're about to hit our stride as a profession, enhancing our reach and heightening the world's awareness of our presence. What I saw and felt was burnout, unlike you could believe. And then, almost collectively, we responded with an enhanced presence. We didn't talk about this at all. It just, like a light came on and we just made the decision to do what chaplains do. We didn't wait for someone to tell us what to do anymore. We just decided to rely on the skills that we have developed, accept the results of our best efforts, share our experiences with each other on the fly, and promote chaplaincy to every single person we met in the clinic and on the street. We began to improvise with the unknown as the catalyst. We began wearing scrubs, as you can see, which made us feel like we were redefining our roles as chaplains, connecting us more to healthcare than the spiritual identity, and most definitely essential. The shift wasn't an isolated event. This is happening all across the country, and we started sharing our experiences with other departments. Major organizations that support chaplaincy created avenues to not only get much needed timely information, but connecting chaplains that were previously on islands to each other in ways that allows for each individual to grow and creates exponential growth for our profession as a whole. One of the examples I am most amazed by was when Russ Davis and Kim Faulkner, VCU's retired former director of pastoral care, got together and decided to bring Kim back exclusively to be the chaplain of chaplains, creating a direct support model for caregivers and establishing an extra line of defense to the harsh realities that stress and burnout cause us. Russ, how dare you force us to practice what we preach, but also thank you for forcing us to practice what we preach. Looking forward to the unfolding of 2021, I don't really expect things to get better, but I do expect chaplains to answer the call. I see an opportunity for a more entrepreneurial model of chaplaincy that's more connected to the individuals and communities than it was before, not because we weren't already connected, but because that's the proper response to this new hurting world. The day's coming where there will be a chaplain on every block, in every neighborhood, in every community in America. I don't know what all of it will look like, but the evidence gathered in the cries from those that have sought our presence over the past year as a response to our new reality shows the need for it. So here I am, ready to rock, gathered here online with all of you on our mission there. I have hope that this year we will continue to redefine ourselves and meet the needs of the world, knowing that it's going to require our best because there is an opportunity when we do that, even if it requires us to fail and adapt on the fly. From theory to action, no permission, no direction, but through connection. I look forward to today as an opportunity for those connections to be made more firm.
Hi, my name is Reverend Jamie Endel. My pronouns are they and them, and I am a hospice chaplain. I'm so honored to be with you here today to share with you my poem. It's called About People, and it's written from the perspective of a chaplain. working through COVID-19 on the front lines. Recently, a friend asked me how many deaths I had witnessed as a healthcare chaplain working through a pandemic. I told them the truth, that I stopped counting the amount of bodies I helped move to a gurney a long time ago, because the numbers are not healthy for me to think about. And anyway, the thing about people is all the good stuff, wrapped up in the details that remain in our heart when the body moves on. This is what matters most, in my opinion, for it is the heart which echoes back to us the memory of their unique laugh, or their love of flowers, or their spirit on fire for justice, or the way they showed up for their community, children, family, friends, and pets, for instance. These are the attributes I remember that make people a person to me. And when we are missing a person, it means we are missing a friend, God forbid a child, a family member, both chosen in blood, or a beloved partner. And these memories are infinite and should not be reduced to black and white numbers on some random graph, chart, or checklist conjured out of morbid curiosity to prove just what exactly?
Wow, what a year. What a year it's been. Who could have imagined the kind of year that we just had? My name is David Fleener. I'm a board-certified chaplain and an ACPE-certified educator working at the Mount Sinai Health System as director of CPE in New York City. I'm coming to you today from my apartment in Queens. It's springtime. I'm looking outside of a window here. Birds are chirping. I'm hearing the usual noise on the street, which is so different from what it sounded like a year ago. A year ago, the usually bustling streets of New York City were really quiet. The only thing I remember hearing was the constant wail of sirens from ambulances taking COVID patients to nearby hospitals. It seemed like it was never ending, all of the sirens that were sounding throughout the neighborhoods, the communities here in New York City. I don't need to tell you, because I'm sure you had it just like we did. It's been a tough year. It's been really tough. My experience of COVID-19 over the last year is, it starts back in February of 2020. My wife and my stepdaughter, we took a trip to Istanbul in Turkey, and we had a fantastic time. We love to take an annual trip to Europe if we're able to do that. And in 2020, we were able to go to Istanbul, Turkey, where none of us had ever been there before, and we had a great time. We came back, and all of a sudden, our 13-year-old was sick, and we assumed it was some sort of flu or some sort of really bad cold. We now assume that it was COVID. It's never been diagnosed, but at that time, that's the best guess that we can come up with, and her doctors think that as well. Because of that, we were taking care of Dorothy, our daughter, and my wife Amy, who's also a chaplain, got sick, and she got severely sick with COVID. Not so severe that she was hospitalized or needed any drastic measures like that, but she was sick and out of commission for quite some time. And then, of course, because we live together, I also got COVID. We're all better now, except for my wife Amy, who's got some long hauler symptoms that she's managing. I'm telling you that because it's part of the story of last year. It's part of the story of working from home sometimes, especially when we were sick, and also going into work at the hospital, which was also a really strange place where beds were being built in the atrium in the lobby area as the governor had our hospital scale up to 150% bed capacity. Fortunately, we would never need those beds. We also had beds out in Central Park right across the street from our hospital in a tent hospital, a field hospital that had been that had popped up, and we did end up using some of those beds. In the midst of all this, I'm supervising CPE. I had residents. And one of the big takeaways from that time for me was getting curious about how possible is it for students to continue to learn in the midst of a major crisis. I practice out of a theory called system-centered theory. And in SCT, we talk a lot about moving into our survivor role or our explorer role. Prior to the pandemic, I really experienced my residents in a great deal of exploration in that role. And then there were times where I felt like I hit a wall with them and that they couldn't reflect. And it occurred to me, yeah, they're stressed. We're in a pandemic. This is unprecedented. And we're all in a survivor role right now, trying to survive from this invisible but very dangerous threat that the whole world is facing. But we were especially facing at that moment in New York City. One of my fondest memories of that time is going with one of my residents down to the morgue. The resident had been on call the night before, and he had heard from the son of a patient who had died at our hospital of COVID. And because of the visitor policy, the restrictions on visitation, he was unable to be with his mom as she died or even after she died. So he called up and asked that we say some prayers over her body. So I went downstairs with the resident to the morgue. We brought a prayer book, and we got the son on the phone. And we offered these prayers in a way that we attempted to be as solemn as possible given the unusual and strange circumstances that we were facing. It's really one of the things I love about chaplaincy. Even though it's tragic and really painful, one of the things I love about the work that we all get to do is that we find ourselves in these strange situations that are mundane or even profane. We were in a morgue that we work to make holy and make sacred. And that for me is the essence of chaplaincy. It's the essence of my priesthood as an Episcopalian, facilitating the sacred in the midst of mundane, even profane circumstances and situations. And in this moment, I was able to do two things. One was, alongside the resident, we were able to bring some comfort to this son who had such grief and pain and loss about not being able to be with his mother when she was having her last breaths. And on that phone call, after we said the prayers, he apologized to her, he wept, and he asked for her forgiveness, which was really moving and really sanctified that experience. The second thing I was able to do in that moment was model for my resident, to teach the resident how to be a spiritual care provider in those circumstances. Now, to his credit, he was far enough along that he didn't need a lot of teaching at that moment. He did a really excellent job providing support. And it felt more like a colleague working with me at that moment, which I feel proud of, because he had worked hard. We had all worked hard to help facilitate his development as a chaplain. So that's one of my primary experiences and memories of the pandemic, especially a year ago when it was all breaking open here in New York City. And things are much brighter now. Things are a lot better. We're a year into this, and things are really looking up. In closing, I just want to say how grateful I am to my colleagues around the country, even the world, our spiritual care colleagues who have been in the trenches in ways that are unimaginable and have come through on the other side, having done what we've all trained to do and what we all love to do, which is provide care to people in the midst of some of the worst times and days of their lives. I feel really proud to be part of the Association of Professional Chaplains. I feel really proud of you, my colleagues, for all that you've been able to do, for all that we've been able to do through this really hard time. And I look forward to a really bright future together. If this pandemic has taught me anything, it's taught me that what we do really, really matters. And what we do brings healing to the world. So I look forward to continuing to do that with you, my friends, in the years to come. God bless you.
Hello, my name is Sue Earlywine, and I'd like to recite this healing prayer for you. It was written many hundreds of years ago by a Buddhist sage named Shantideva. Its words, though, remain relevant for all of the challenges that we face today in this world. His Holiness the Dalai Lama recites a version of this prayer every morning. and I'd like to recite it now for you. May all beings everywhere, plagued by sufferings of body and mind, obtain an ocean of happiness and joy by virtue of my merits. May those whose bodies are worn with toil be restored on finding repose, and those weak with sorrow find joy. May the forlorn find hope, constant happiness, and prosperity. May all medicines be effective, and wholesome prayers bear fruit. May all who are sick and ill quickly be freed from their ailments. Whatever diseases there are in the world, may they never occur again. And may people think of benefiting each other. May I become, at all times, both now and forever, a protector for those without protection, a guide for those who've lost their way, a ship for those with oceans to cross, a bridge for those with rivers to cross, a sanctuary for those in danger, a lamp for those without light, and a place of refuge for those who lack shelter, and a servant for all those in need. For as long as space endures, and for as long as living beings remain, until then may I too abide to dispel the misery of this world. May all beings benefit. Thank you very much.
Much of the work that chaplains do is what I would describe as invisible labor. Whether that's sitting with the individual as they get a new diagnosis, or their family members as they cope with that new information, or the staff members in our hospitals that care for them. That work goes largely unseen. During this past year, things have shifted and changed, and much of the work that we do has become more visible. There have been story after story written in major news outlets about the work that chaplains like you are doing to care for people within the healthcare system. Now, our work has changed some during this time. We've had to pivot and get creative, working with folks over the telephone or by video screen. And that is different. We've had to change some of our practices. But at the heart of all things, the work that we do has not changed. We as chaplains are there to help people make connections, whether that's connections to their loved ones or themselves or their community, or however they describe the divine. We are there to help bridge the gap. And that work has continued and has been seen. I have had the privilege of reading dozens, if not hundreds, of stories about chaplains across the globe as they care for people in their institutions, caring for patients, sitting at the bedside when they can, sitting with family members in waiting rooms, talking over the phone and holding sacred spaces, being with their healthcare colleagues as they struggle with all of the uncertainty and all of the unknowns. Now, there's a lot of this work that I recognize is invisible. No one will see the cost of this care that you all have provided. But the world is seeing how chaplains engage in our pillars of strength within our institutions, within our healthcare systems, supporting not only the person who is in a hospital bed, but the nurse or the doctor or the custodian or the nutrition worker who comes in every day to help support them. There's no way I can do these stories justice. I wish that you could hear about your colleagues in Indianapolis, in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, in Madison, Wisconsin, and Lancaster, Pennsylvania, Seattle, Washington, Kansas City, and in Europe, in Australia, and beyond. But it would be impossible to capture all those stories. There are two words I wish to leave you with, which I think are hidden within all of the stories that have been written about chaplains during this past year. And those two words are Thank you. Your work has been seen.
I would like to lift up those of our colleagues who have suffered much from this pandemic, those whose positions have been eliminated, those who have been separated from their friends or their family in order to continue to provide care to their patients, families, and staff, those who have been overwhelmed emotionally and spiritually by all that they have endured, those who have contracted the virus, who are recovering, and those who are still enduring symptoms and illness. And especially we lift up those colleagues who have died from COVID and other circumstances throughout this last year. Let us pause now for silent reflection and prayer for each of them. Amen.
Good morning. The surah I'm going to recite to you today is from the Quran, chapter 94. It's called Al-Shar, which means the relief. So I'm going to recite it in Arabic and we'll show you the meaning in English. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ألم نشرح لك صدرك ووضعنا عنك وزرك الذي أنقض ظهرك ورفعنا لك ذكرك فإن مع العسر يسرا إن مع العسر يسرا فإذا فرغت فانصب وإلى ربك فارغب صدق الله العظيم.
A reading from Psalms 139. You have searched me, Lord, and you know me.
You know when I sit and when I rise. You perceive my thoughts from afar.
You discern my going out and my lying down. You are familiar with all my ways.
Before a word is on my tongue, you, Lord, know it completely.
You hem me in behind and before, and you lay your hand upon me.
Such knowledge is too wonderful for me, too lofty for me to attain.
Where can I go from your spirit? Where can I flee from your presence?
If I go up to the heavens, you are there. If I make my bed in the depths, you are there.
If I rise on the wings of the dawn, if I settle on the far side of the sea,
even there your hand will guide me. Your right hand will hold me fast.
If I say, surely the darkness will hide me, and the light become night around me,
even the darkness will not be dark to you. The night will shine like the day, for darkness is as light to you.
For you created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb.
I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well.
Thank you for taking the time to gather in this virtual community of professional chaplains. It's been nearly 2 years that we've had a conference in person, and I miss that time together so much. And on top of that, so much has happened since we were last together, so much we would never have imagined, and I'm grateful for connecting at least in this way for now. Last month there were 3 great celebrations: Passover together with the spring equinox, and then the next week, Western Easter. As you hear this service, some of our chaplains will be observing Ramadan, and others are awaiting still the celebration of Eastern Easter. In a time like this, we need big stories, epic stories, to carry the weight of our lives. In a world of slavery, death of innocents, and plague, the Almighty delivers a people from bondage and brings them into freedom in a new land. In Easter, Christians celebrate the defeat of death and the triumph of love and life. In the spring equinox, even the earth awakens from a dark sleep and shifts towards the sun's light and warmth. How does it do that? These are big stories that tell us struggle is for a time, but dawn comes again, and there is hope for new life, for new creation. This is what our ancestors of faith tell us. Dawn comes in the morning, and we need their guidance in times like these. We need big stories because it doesn't really matter where we serve as chaplains, whether it's in healthcare, long-term care, hospice, business, or the military. Wherever chaplains are found, we have held our arms around communities of people experiencing loss and death and grief. Not only in the experience of a virus named COVID-19, but also as the structures of systemic racism have been exposed, witnessing heavy stories, holding heavy words, holding even heavy silences. And for those of my brothers and sisters whose skin color is not celebrated as beautiful, but is used to exclude them, the weight is so much heavier still. I'm reminded of a small story that might speak to our work as chaplains. After the great Exodus story, we find Moses leading the people as they journey towards the promised land. There's the story of the battle with the Amalekites. We don't find Moses in the front line of the battle as a warrior. If you remember this story, he's found watching over those engaged in the fight, present with them, but as a witness and visible to them. They know he is with him because they can see his arms raised up over them as if in a blessing. When his arms were raised up, they seemed to prevail, and so it may not have seemed like a lot, but holding his arms up was a kind of way to hold them and give them strength. Even from the sidelines, Moses perhaps heard, "Just hold us. Remind us of who fights with us. Encourage us so that we may remain strong through the night. Hold us in your prayers. Remember me. Remember my family." And Moses did just that. But even that small gesture of holding your arms up can become exhausting. And Moses' arms become heavy and begin to sag. His back braces with the weight. The weight is transferred to his core, and it takes all of his strength just to hold up his arms. For he is holding the lives of the people, holding their stories, their losses, their grief and pain. So what does Moses do? He sits down on a rock. I like to think that he grounds himself into the creation, that he embraces Mother Earth, and also 2 partners join him at his side. Aaron is there to hold one arm and Hur to join the other or hold the other. Together, the 3 of them, present and visible, as witnesses and intercessors, together they prevail to victory because the people see them as holding their lives. The people see them as intercessors and helping to connect them to the one who looks over them, connects them to the one who is working to bring freedom, to bring life out of death, to establish justice in a new land, to end strife, to know prosperity for all, and that milk and honey will be there for everyone in the promised land. I see this story of Moses, that care is grounded in community. We cannot do this work alone. While many of us may serve in areas where we are the only chaplain, we take our strength to hold others by taking great care of ourselves, by finding support in connection with others, like what we are doing now in spending time together and hearing one another's stories, letting go what we carry in words, in tears, in heavy silences, and to be reminded together of the power of what we offer, not only to others, but as we care for and support one another here in APC. So as we move ahead into these summer months, I'm hopeful we will soon get ahead of this virus. I hope that means that we can begin to let our arms down. All the pain and grief that you have heard and carried and taken into your bodies, that they may be relaxed and eased in rest and in renewed activity, especially with wider distribution of the vaccine, maybe to once again be able to put our arms around one another, not only family and friends, but our colleagues, to be able to experience the care that you so deserve, the care that we are longing for deep in our bones. As a part of that care, I want to say thank you. Thank you for the ways that you have been an advocate for what is the right thing to do. Thank you for the ways that you have been a surrogate for others, standing in for family, for the dying, visiting the lonely, providing cool water for staff. I am so proud of the stories we have heard in the news and the comments of people who have been touched in this time by the work of a chaplain. I heard someone in my hospital say, "The patients tell me that the most consistent contact they had throughout their time in the hospital with COVID was the regular visit by the chaplain. That's what got them through." I have heard from some of our chaplains that their organizations, there is a new intention to address the inequalities of systemic racism. Chaplains are taking leadership to facilitate groups and to help raise awareness of the destructive forces of racism, and are helping to build new ways of operating and not just business as usual. You are incredibly talented. You have valuable skills, and I thank you for all the ways that you have stepped up and stepped into this past year. As we go forward, I hope we can be intentional about telling our stories and finding ways that we can express our lament, the chaplain's lament. We too have sadness and grief. Some have lost family and colleagues. Many lives, including some of our own, have been completely changed. We will need to release those feelings too and let them be heard. Let's be sure to give ourselves that care, for we need it too. As we look forward, I want to celebrate the incredible creativity and recreation that was released in the past year. When pressed to the edges of our comfort zones, amazing innovation emerged that did not keep chaplaincy out, but found ways for us to be near to the people who were seeking our care. And there were whole new arenas that came looking for us to give support. Amazingly, during the pandemic, APC is anticipating the future in new ways through a new organization. Now is not the time to go into those details. I just want to observe that the hardships we have come through have not left us discouraged or defeated, but in fact envisioning a future in which professional chaplains have so much to offer. We are catalysts for healthy growth and integration. We help foster the best wherever people may gather, in work or in community. And you should feel very proud as a chaplain to contribute to and promote healthy and strong systems based on fairness and justice. Not to rush things too quickly, but I can soon imagine us exercising those arms again, so we can hold the broken again and to bring comfort and strength to those who need our care. In closing, I remember that one of those who held up his arms or held up the arms of Moses was Aaron of the priestly tribe. An ancient and beloved blessing is attributed to Aaron, and I invite you now to raise your arm and maybe place your hand on your chest or your heart and hear this blessing for you. May the Almighty bless you and keep you. May the Lord lift up his face to shine upon you. May the Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. Peace be with you. Amen.
Have you ever felt like nobody was there? Have you ever felt forgotten in the middle of nowhere? Have you ever felt like you could disappear? Like you could fall and no one would hear?
Well, let that lonely feeling wash away. Maybe there's a reason to believe you'll be okay. 'Cause when you don't feel strong enough to stand, you can reach out your hand.
And oh, someone will come running, and I know they'll take you home. Even when the dark comes crashing through, when you need a friend to carry you, and when you're broken on the ground, you will be found. So let the sun come streaming in, and you'll reach up and you'll rise again. Lift your head and look around. You will be found. You will be found. You will be found. You will be found. You will be found.
There's a place where you don't have to feel unknown. And every time that you call out, you're a little less alone.
If you only say the word, from across the silence, your voice is heard.
Even when the dark comes crashing through, when you need a friend to carry you, and when you're broken on the ground, you will be found. So let the sun come streaming in, 'cause you'll reach up and you'll rise again. If you only look around, you will be found. You will be found. You will be found. You will be found. Out of the shadows, the morning is breaking, and all the sun comes streaming in, 'cause you'll reach up and you'll rise again. If you only look around, you will be found.
I would like to thank each of you who participated in today's service. What a gift to hear your reflections, your readings, and your prayers for each of us. A special thanks to Sarah Byrne Martelli, who provided our music throughout the service today and assembled the chorus of singers to bring us our final song. And thank you all for giving yourself the gift of coming to this sacred gathering of colleagues and friends. Our hope is that it provided you an offering of reflection and renewal as we continue to serve those who need us most. May the love and comfort of our Creator be with each of you, each of us, as we heal, learn, and grow from our journey over this last year. Blessings to you.